Welcome back to Manly Matters, all you cool cats and kittens. Today's episode is all about cats.
Carol Baskin.
Okay, no, but really, today's episode is about finding your tribe. But first, I gotta mention, hopefully later this week, a new video will be coming out. It's an interview with a good friend of mine who I met a few years ago, and he has got an awesome story. And there's a whole lot of value that can be taken from his story. But without further ado, let's get into the topic. So when you hear the term tribalism, what do you think? Typically, it's either gonna be a negative or a positive. And it all depends on what you're talking about. So on one hand, you've got community, collectiveness, a group working together. On the other hand, you have groupthink and a few bad actors warping the minds of others. But it ultimately depends on the chieftains that are leading the tribe, and we're going to talk about that here in a few minutes. So I'm going to bring it way on back to Benjamin Franklin here for a second. And he just happens to be one of my favorite founding fathers, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that he wrote a very sarcastic article about flatulence, making fun of the pseudo-intellectuals of the time. But that's neither here nor there. In a letter he wrote to Peter Collison in 1793, he talked about how he noticed that a lot of the European settlers and the Americans at the time were defecting to Native American tribes, and that there wasn't very much in the other direction. In other words, not a lot of Native Americans were acclimating to the Europeans' culture. Not only that, he talked about how Europeans that were captured by Native American tribes and liberated and brought back to the European American culture left, wanted to go back. And he couldn't understand why this was happening. Not only that, there was a French noble living in America at the time named Henry de Crevecoeur, named Henry, who was quoted as saying, "Thousands of Europeans are Indians, and we have no examples of even one of those aborigines having from choice becoming European. There must be in their social bonding something singularly captivating and far superior to anything to be boasted among us." So why do I bring that up? I just wonder what would compel these Americans or Europeans to defect and leave to join these Native Americans. But on the other hand, almost no Native Americans wanted to join European culture. So we can kind of narrow it down to it had to be something about their way of life. But what about their way of life was it? So I'm going to switch topics real quick, and this is one that's actually near and dear to my heart. The suicide rates for combat veterans are about 25 to every 100,000. That is higher than the average American. However, suicides on combat deployments are very rare. You almost never hear about them. Why is that? Could it be that you have a collective group working together for a singular mission? Also, to narrow this topic down a little bit, rates of depression and anxiety have been noted to be higher in combat veterans after deployments, when they get home, when they're with their family, than they are when they're in combat zones. Today, we live in a very autonomous society, much more so than we did in the 1700s. You can live in a house and maybe not know any more about your neighbors than their first names for years. You might live in an apartment complex and not know anything besides maybe a few people's names. And frankly, it's kind of sad. Now, let me be clear.
So we must be clear.
I'm not bashing the technology and the niceties and the ease of living that we have today, but that doesn't mean we can't learn something from a group that was so tightly knit, people were willing to leave much nicer situations to go live with them in the woods, essentially. So I try my best not to lump people into groups of races or age or anything like that, because a lot of times it's not super productive, but for this instance, it is. Statistically speaking, the wealthiest people in America are middle-aged white men. However, the highest suicide rate of any group in America is in middle-aged white men. How does that make any sense whatsoever? Well, for one, money doesn't buy happiness. I think that can be proven there. But two, maybe through affluence, we tend to separate ourselves from others, right? Doesn't mean that we don't have friends, we don't have things like that, but you typically kind of wall yourself off the more money you have. Your yards are bigger, your houses are bigger. You tend to spend more time worrying about money and at work and things like that than you do communing with other people. So I'm here to make the case that maybe, just maybe, we have a tribe problem in America. Things that tribes shouldn't be relegated to. Things like politics, age, sex. Tribes should be a collective group of people working together for a singular goal. And at the rudimentary level, that can mean health, survival, and health means mental health as well. So a good example of negative tribalism is what we have currently right now in the political world. We have a whole lot of politicians who are just bad actors in this world that are taking advantage of people's tendency to huddle together in tribes to manipulate them and make them hate the other group. You see it all the time. You see things like identity politics. That is a good example of tribalism being used against you. Gangs, they're another example of tribalism gone wrong. It's a group of people who just happen to live near each other or be in the same neighborhood that decide that they hate another group of people simply because of a color they wear. And you typically have high drug use, high murder rate, things like that in those areas. So everyone has to be wary of those kinds of tribes. It's very easy to get sucked into those tribes, and it's very easy to get manipulated by those tribes. And that's ultimately why I said you have to know who the chieftain of that tribe is, and you have to ensure that he's there for positivity, for growth, for good things. So ultimately what we need to do is we need to create tribes, join tribes, contribute to tribes that are here for accountability, for our well-being, for the collective well-being of the whole, not for these selfish, self-righteous tribes. And another good example is doing for others, sacrificing something of yourself for someone else has shown to be really good for our mental health.
You drop this, bro! Pull over your car!
Now, I'm not saying that you should help people just for yourself, but altruism has shown to release dopamine and oxytocin in the brain. If you're unaware, those are the feel-good chemicals in the brain. That in and of itself shows how important self-sacrifice for others is for us as a species. So now maybe you're asking, where do I find my tribe? Look next door. Go to a gym. Go to a church. Go to a barbecue. Join an intramural sports team. Something. Find a group of people that are collectively working together and giving something from themselves to the group, and you'll find your tribe. So find your tribe, contribute to your tribe, get something out of your tribe, be healthier. If you find this topic interesting, please go out and look for the book Tribe by Sebastian Junger. A lot of the ideas that I got for this video and a lot of the talking points I have for this video come from either this book or some interviews that he's done in the past. So if this is something you're interested in, please go out, look this book up. It is a great read. I've read it twice now. It's phenomenal. So thank you for watching. Please hit that thumbs up button if you liked it. Hit the subscribe if you haven't already. Share it with your friends. Talk about it at the water cooler. And as always, if you agree, you disagree, you want to call me an idiot, please leave a comment. I greatly appreciate it. Stay tuned later this week for that interview, and hope to see you next time. Adios.